in this meeting. I'm joined tonight by Ms. LeClaire, Mr. Myers, Mr. Stark, Mr. Curley, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Matola, Mr. Penley, and our interim CFO, Mr. Becker. Ask you all to please rise for the pledge and remain standing for a moment of silence to honor Governor Joby Will, whose funeral was today. Ms. Charlton, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to hear, consider, and approve 2025 officers. Can I have a motion for chair? Mr. Matola.
Thank you. Yes, I need to nominate Lori Charlton as the chair for the upcoming year. I think Lori's been doing it for 4 years now. I think it's 4 years. You've done it 3 years. I lose track of time the older I get. But you've done a fantastic job. I think fair with the members of this body, and I think you deserve to be the chair again. And sounds like you want to do it again, so I nominate you to.
Do we have a second for that nomination? Mr. Curley? Ms. Charlton, do you accept this nomination?
I accept.
Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor of Ms. Charlton for chair, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you, and I'm happy to hand over the gavel back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Selectwoman Vitale. I appreciate you being here. The Selectwoman is here tonight because our first selectman is celebrating his 30th anniversary, so he got the night off rather than kicking us off tonight. So we wish him a happy anniversary. I would like to move to nominate John Matola as our vice chair. I don't have a prepared speech, but all I will say, John has been a good friend, a great sounding board, extremely fair, impartial, straight down the middle, board member and vice chairman for these past 3 years with me. He's also brought a wealth of experience to the board from his time on the Board of Education, on the RTM, and on this board, and a lot of wisdom. So I hope everyone will, I think everyone probably agrees with that assessment, and I hope you'll join me in supporting John as vice chair. Can I have a second? Mr. Curley? Okay, any discussion or other nominations for vice chair? Okay, seeing none, all in favor for John Matola as vice chair, say aye. Okay, it is unanimous, 8-0 with, I didn't ask you if you accept, but you got me to say accept. Congratulations, John.
Thank you, everybody.
So do I have a nomination for secretary for the board? Mr. Penley?
Yes, I'll nominate Mr. Curley. He's an excellent secretary. I've seen him taking his notes. Did some of them earlier this week. They were thorough, accurate, and do a good job this next year.
Can I have a second? Mr. Matola, any other nominations for secretary or any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, Fred Curley for secretary for the upcoming year, say aye. All right, it is unanimous, 8-0. Hey, thank you. Kevin, why is your face on the screen?
In case I can't hear the meeting.
All right.
Which happens quite
I had to do a double take.
Two of them.
I'm trying to get rid of myself. But I can't find another picture that where I put up my Venmo. Maybe people will send me money.
All right, well, before we get started, I just thank you to my colleagues for your support. It's been an honor to serve as chair. Thank you for entrusting it to me again. I looked back at the comments I made during this meeting last year, and there were a couple of themes. The current administration was brand new at the time. We were anticipating changes, as there always are when there are changes in leadership. I talked a bit about the unique role this board plays in our town government and our responsibility to be independent of the administration as we exercise fiscal compliance oversight. Doesn't mean we don't work together collaboratively, but it does mean we have a duty to question and to evaluate, and when appropriate to challenge the proposals that come before us on behalf of the residents who entrusted us with this role. Looking back over this past year, I think we've done that in good faith as a board, and I appreciate that the administration has generally embraced our input and our feedback, and they've been responsive to our concerns and priorities. I also talked about how we could be more effective as a board and some of the goals I hoped we would achieve. Looking back at your goals from a year ago can be a little dicey sometimes, but I was happy to see that we've completed or put into motion all the things that we set out to do. We talked about the need to reevaluate our policies around fund balance and reserves. We now have an active committee working together with the administration on that project for the first time in many years, and I'm really happy that work is progressing. I want to thank Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Curley for their commitment to the fund balance subcommittee, and to the other board members who are not on the committee, but who have been participating nonetheless and have brought really valuable insights and perspective to that effort, particularly Mr. Walsh. We talked about reevaluating our bonding and debt service policies in light of the challenges the town is facing from a capital project perspective. Again, we're actively working on that. And from a broader perspective, the entire board's been engaged in the capital planning process. I think the administration's done some great work. We have a long way to go, but I think it's getting the level of focus and attention it needs. And I think this board has been a key part of that. We had a goal to reevaluate our senior and disabled tax relief program and determine if it was meeting its objective, promoting affordability for our seniors, while remaining affordable for our taxpayers as a whole. I want to thank Mr. Curley for leading that committee this past year, along with Mr. Matola and Mr. Stark, and leading our board through an amendment process that enhanced those benefits for our seniors. We talked about continuing our effort to proactively improve the budget process in terms of quality of information analysis for this board. I think we've made excellent progress on that front. And I also believe we can continue to get a lot better. So I hope to recruit an active and enthusiastic budget committee to, I'm looking at Jim Myers right now, to do some of that work this year. We had just voted on a new purchasing policy after a 4-year effort, and we had a goal to see it implemented and to revisit it within a year to evaluate any needed improvements. We got that done under the 1-year deadline last month. So thank you all. We know we need more simplification and streamlining on that policy as we move forward, and I hope we'll have board members willing to pick up the mantle in a subcommittee and do that work this coming year. Last but definitely not least, I want to thank Mr. Matola and Ms. Leclerc for chairing and vice chairing the audit subcommittee and leading the work it does together with our internal and external auditors, reviewing the town's audit results and financial controls. The work that committee does has been a personal passion for me. And again, I want to thank my colleagues on that committee for your dedication and your diligence in ensuring those audits are taken seriously and get the appropriate level of attention and follow-up. So I will be asking board members for your preferences in serving on a committee this year, and I hope we can make it a goal to all participate. In closing, just again want to thank everyone for your commitment to the town, for everything you do. And again, it's been an honor to serve as chair. Does anyone have any comments before we move on? Okay. To the members of the public who've dialed in or joined us on Zoom tonight, please know you're muted, will not be heard by board members, and there will be no live public comment until called for during the meeting. We welcome public comment on our voting items, which are items 4 through 8 on tonight's agenda. Members of the public are always encouraged to send their comments and questions in writing to the board. So I want to note that a new process is being implemented to contact board members through the town website. On the Board of Finance page on the website, there is a link on the menu on the left-hand side of the page that says Contact the Board. If members of the public click on that link, it brings up a form where residents can input their name and address and include their comments and even upload an attachment if they wish. This new process will replace the bof@fairfieldct.org email address as the way to contact board members. As we transition to this new process, anyone that sends an email to that old address will get an automated response directing them to use the form on the new website, the new form on the website, but we'll still get those emails for the next couple months temporarily. Over time, that email address will be permanently phased out. And if someone does email, they will get an auto response directing them to the form, but will no longer get those emails forwarded to us. And this process is also being implemented by the other boards, just for everyone's information. It's in response to the spam and the unreliability of us getting those emails. And I think it will work out well. I've tested it. It looks good. It's easy to use. And I hope that it will become easy for everyone. There is also still going to be an option for, there will also be a way for members of the public to contact us individually if they would like to. So they'll be able to do that through the website, but just want everybody to be aware of that. So if you are talking to constituents, again, town website, Board of Finance page. If they can't get to the page, they can search Board of Finance. It's right there. And it's very easy to see.
And then we respond to that email?
Yes.
We're responding to everyone on the board or just the person?
No, we'll respond to the person.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Do we get notified when something comes through on the website?
Yes. So it'll come to you as an email, but it's not going to an email address. So they'll fill out the form and then that will generate an email to all of us and you'll see the constituents, name, address, and their message. Mr. Walsh?
The emails go to everybody on the board?
It'll go to everybody on the board, yeah.
But responses, but only go to the individual?
Well, yeah, if you respond, you're gonna respond to the individual, right? Just like you do now to avoid FOIA.
Well, if we're not FOIA, but responded to everybody. It's not a FOIA, but bringing violation if it responded, like we're all getting that email.
Right.
But if it responds, then it all goes to everybody, not a FOIA, but violation.
So, well, it'll be the same as it is. I mean, typically now when we respond to a constituent, we respond to them directly and we don't reply all. So.
But you can.
But
You can if you want to.
You can. We're technically not supposed to, have to do anything that could be construed as, deliberative discussions among the board.
Just curious,
Yes.
if somebody currently wants to send one email to multiple boards, how would that work? Would they have to do it 3 different places?
That's a good question. So Dave Kelly is on. Dave, can you, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, that's correct. They would have to fill it out on each of the board's websites.
Okay, thank you.
Does my individual response go to the town as well?
Dave, can you answer that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm unmuting. Only if you address it to someone in the town.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I want to thank Dave for getting this done. I know there's been a fair amount of frustration. I know we get a lot of spam email. Sometimes we don't get emails from constituents. They've been inconsistent. So I hope this is helpful. Test it out, try it. And, hopefully by the time we get to budget season, which is typically when we get most of our feedback from the public, this thing will have been up and running for a while and everybody will be used to using it. Okay, so tonight's our organizational meeting. Aside from electing officers, we'll also vote on our meeting schedule for the coming year. We have a number of other items of business, grants, appropriations, and transfers that require a vote. And we can move into those agenda items now. So we'll move to item 4, Sustainable Fairfield Task Force. This is to hear, consider, and act upon approving the acceptance of a grant in the amount of $5,000 from the Funnel Family Fund to the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force, and further approving the appropriation of the grant funds to pay expenses incurred by the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force to pay for pumpkin composting and other recycling and waste needs that Sustainable Fairfield determines. I have a motion to hear this item. Curley, seconded by Ruggiero. The materials for this item begin on page 1 of the posted backup online. And we have Becky Bonnell here, who is chair of the Flood and Erosion Control Board and a member of the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force, to talk to us about this item. Welcome, Becky. Good to see you.
Hi, thank you for hearing this item. Yeah, basically this item is a donation from a donor advised fund to the town, specifically for the use of Sustainable Fairfield to do various recycling and waste initiatives as the Sustainable Fairfield team sees fit. It was originally thought to just cover the pumpkin composting, which is done at 10 of the schools in town. And we put a big dumpster at the schools, and everyone brings their pumpkins after Thanksgiving and Halloween. And we got about 20 tons last year of pumpkins, which actually, if those had gone into the waste stream, we spend about just under $100 to incinerate our waste. So that $100 times 20 tons, we're saving quite a bit of money by sending them out to be composted. So the funds would go towards pumpkin composting as well as other types of recycling and waste as Sustainable Fairfield sees fit. We're thinking those would be zero waste events, exploring other ways to make the town more efficient and effective with our recycling. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, by the way. Thank you very much for this. Questions from the board? Mr. Walsh?
Vanessa, has this check been deposited in the town account yet?
To my knowledge, the town has received the check. It is sitting in a town. I don't know if it's actually been deposited. My understanding is the town wanted to put it in a separate account. Sustainable Fairfield does have funds in a line item budget right now under, I believe, DPW, and the town was proposing to put these in a separate line item budget just to be able to track them efficiently. But to answer your question, I don't know if the check has actually been deposited.
I appreciate that. Then I'll direct the question to our CFO. Has the check been deposited yet?
I can get you an answer for sure. We were holding on to it initially. I'll get back to the board and confirm if it was or wasn't.
Great. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Walsh?
This is just in general, not in regards to this. Could our clerk keep track of all the requests that we requested? Per meeting.
Yeah,
That'd be good.
that's you.
That's awesome. Great. That's what you get the big bucks for.
Absolutely. Okay.
I have felt that things that I've asked for have not been. So I want to start keeping track of that a little better.
Anything in particular you want us to follow up on, or?
Well, I'm not at a response from our last meeting. You sent me a response and I get it from the DOE quarterly regarding their response to my question, but I've made several requests during the town side presentation.
Okay.
I've not received a response.
All right. So David, okay, we'll do that.
But I think there's other things that have been, and I'll talk to you about it offline, but I'd like to, as we're moving into the new year, have a process because we're paying a clerk, we're paying deputy clerk kind of, and we have, I think it should just be all good orders.
All right. I'll try to take better notes myself.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
I would just ask, that end, and it's less about a clerk making a list and following up, but also about town staff and the, that obviously every board member has a general sense of what they can ask for, but usually these are technically through the chair.
I can hear you, David.
Technically through the chair, and then for the chair or the board as a whole to determine, just how much staff time and timeframes.
And also so that when
This
the,
is a minor one, but there's some others that are.
and I want to vote on this item, but yeah, so requests from should technically come through the chair so that when we get the response, we can distribute it to all board members.
Oh, so this is a light lift. Some of these other items are not, and
Agreed.
continually short step.
Okay. All right, so we can vote on this item. So all in favor of accepting the grant set forth in item 4, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous, 9-0. Thank you again, Becky. It was good to see you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, so item 5. This is to hear, consider, so 3 parts. Part A, to hear, consider, and act upon approving a grant agreement between the Connecticut Department of Transportation Highway Safety, Town of Fairfield, Police Department's Click It or Ticket Enforcement Program, and to further approve acceptance of the grant funds and their appropriation for the purposes set forth in the grant agreement. B, to hear, consider, and act upon approving a grant agreement between the Connecticut Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office and the Town of Fairfield for the Fairfield Police Department's Comprehensive DUI Enforcement Program, and to further approve acceptance of the grant funds and their appropriation for the purposes set forth in the grant agreement. And finally, C, to hear, consider, and act upon approving a grant agreement between the Connecticut Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office and the Town of Fairfield for the Fairfield Police Department's Speed and Aggressive Driving Enforcement Program, and to further approve acceptance of the grant funds and their appropriation for the purposes set forth in the grant agreement. Motion to hear this item, Mr. Curley, seconded by Ms. Ruggiero. So the materials for this item are included in the posted backup beginning on page 4. And we have Chief Calmaris here to present this item. Welcome. Good to see you.
Here or there?
That's fine.
Cheers.
So the first item is federal grant funding for Click It or Ticket in the amount of $9,992.30. Are occurring every year. The amounts for the grants are just a little bit different every year. And that goes for the other 2 grants as well, the speed and aggressive driving and the DUI enforcement. One of these items, I believe it's the last one, already occurred, July 1 through September 5th, 24th. And that was never brought before the boards. But just to clarify and make adjustments, we brought it before the boards and having it approved. Any questions?
Questions from the board? Ms. Ruggiero?
So when you say we have these today, are we getting the same amount? Is there any change in the amount year over year?
No, the amount is predetermined. We submit an application for the amounts. We actually have calendar dates that we schedule for whatever type of enforcement deployment we are going to have. And then this federal government approves those, the funding based on that deployment strategy and operation.
So do we anticipate, it sounds like it's just status quo from year over year, but do we anticipate having an increase in tickets or any change as a result of this ban? I imagine we're supposed to obviously do the enforcement that's requested. If
So-
we have more tickets, will that result in additional revenue? How will the town?
So there is no quota per se, but we are encouraged to go out and do enforcement. And the reason why we get so much money is because we go out and form when we're provided the grant funding to do so.
Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Myers?
Yeah, so I was just gonna ask, I mean, I think you answered, but the level of, I guess, whatever you're doing, I mean, two things. Is it the same every year or is this encouraging you to do more, I guess is my first question.
So they're all a little bit unique in their own way. So the click it or ticket, we do 2 waves during the year. And it's like you go out there for an enforcement period, which is usually a week or two. It changes year to year. And the officers go out there and it's encouraged that all the officers, but there is some augmentation. In this particular case, it's $9,900 where they augment our overtime to send out additional staffing to go and do that work. For example, the DUI, that is throughout the year, there's scheduled dates and times that the officers will deploy. Of course, there are, circumstances that might change, and in those cases, we just apply to this state, apply to the grant, through the grant process to say, we couldn't get officers to fill this weekend, so we're requesting to move that to a different weekend. It really helps to augment our weekend staffing because oftentimes we have events during the weekend that we use those officers to get out there and show an omnipresence out in the public.
So I guess my question, how do you determine whether you're doing enough?
How do we determine whether we're doing?
How do you know you're spending enough to monitor these 3 things? Because they're obviously very important to the state, they're very important to our town to make sure that we're doing these things. Is it, you're just doing enough to satisfy the grant, or are you doing enough to actually curb behavior?
I think we're doing enough to curb behavior. I also think that the reason why we get recurring grants every year is because our officers go out and do it, and the supervisors are pushing them to do the work when they're out there. If the federal government is paying for you to go out and do this work, you're gonna go out and do the work, and that's part of my job to make sure that, that is enforced through the ranks and to the officers that are doing the work on the road.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Mr. Matola?
So I assumed if you have to demonstrate to the feds that you're doing the work in order for you to get these grants. Is that a statement?
That's a fair statement, and we also provide them with all the statistical data that comes with the enforcement of the officer. So whatever we go out there and do, if we pull over 10 cars and get 10 verbal warnings, that's not gonna cut the mustard. At the same time, if they go out there and there's no violations, there's no violations, but you all drive around. It's like shooting fish in a barrel.
And so the only other question, so for the 2024 speed and aggressive driving enforcement grant, that time period has passed already?
That's correct. Yeah, if you look at the approved period, it's July 1, 2024 through September 5th, 2024.
So we got the money, used it, we're kind of doing this retroactively, approving this.
Employed the officers. You are accepting the grant. If you don't accept the grant.
We have to pay for it ourselves. Oh, I get it. All right, I understand. So
We currently have the fund in their budget.
this is reimburses those funds. Okay.
But yeah, and part of that was a timing from summer. We do the initial rounds of paperwork right away for them to get into that window to capture the ability to apply, but have to go back for all the approvals and the board of selectmen.
These deployments, unlike other grants, they're 100% funded. There's no in-kind contribution that we have to pay forward.
Thank you, Mr. Matola.
Thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
Chief, we've gotten this grant every year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then when I look at your problem ID section, identification section, and you have your chart of offenses and things like that, it apparently shows that on the click it or ticket and on the DUI, that from 21 to 23. Despite the fact that we're using this money and you're enforcing all year, obviously. It's not just, this is just extra money to have more heavy enforcement. It seems like everything's getting worse. Meaning that And the unbelted crashes from 21 to 23, it goes up every year from 11 to 31. Then it goes to, you know, thank God, the fatalities haven't really gone up, but the injuries have gone up to 3, 23 at 17. And then the citations you issue have also gone up significantly. From, it was at 100, then it went down to 22, and then it was 85. And then on the DUIs, the alcohol crashes went from 37 up to 56. It went up from 1 to 23. Once again, your DUI arrests went up significantly as well, from 66 to 76. Doesn't seem like it's working. Right? Do you find the same thing? Is this happening in your other communities the same way?
Yeah, and
It's a Fairfield problem.
no, it's a statewide, it's a federal problem, and I'll also add that, you know, in having conversations with other chiefs in similar sized organizations
Yeah.
throughout the state, we are far above the standard department with respect to our traffic enforcement efforts significantly.
I've heard that from citizens too.
I'll take it as a
They
compliment.
call me to try to get consults, but yes. So despite the amount of enforcement, it doesn't seem to be driving the numbers down. They might even actually probably be higher, maybe if we weren't doing this increased enforcement, correct?
Well, I mean, you could look at it as a couple of different ways. You know, this is a federal grant, so it's nationwide, and we are just maybe a very small fraction of that, and maybe we show a significant increase in
Sure.
certain areas that may not show in other areas of the country.
Okay.
I only look at Fairfield,
Mhm.
you know,
Yes.
and maybe state level,
Yes.
and I gladly accept the money when they give it to me.
Now, on the other side, on the aggressive driving, fair amount of enforcement increase. More than, a little bit less than more. But I thought I'd see more aggressive driving this thing. That's really good. These crashes, thank God, no fatalities, and speed injuries are around the exact same. So it doesn't seem to be applying there, with all the talk in the media of aggressive driving. Doesn't mean that's okay.
We focus more on speed. We do have aggressive driving, focus more on speed because they kind of go hand in hand. And when you get a lot of traffic, you get driver frustration, which leads to, you know, poor driving behavior, and it kind of exacerbates from there. So, you know, that's what we see on the road. We try to focus on the speed enforcement, especially on the aggressive driving enforcement. Focus on the speed, and oftentimes, it pays dividends with the aggressive driving component.
Is there also enforcement in regards to these electric bikes? I'm seeing all over town.
So we are currently talking about that, not only in our administration, but I'm also a member of the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association Traffic Safety Committee. And I think we are urging our lobbyists to push legislation forward for e-bike regulations, because there currently aren't any regulations on e-bikes. So that is a big topic of discussion, and I could probably venture to say that you will see some legislation, bipartisan legislation being pushed forward here for that type of.
Maybe not legislate locally.
We can, yeah, and you know, Stratford just recently did it on a couple of, they kind of grouped in legislation on e-bike regulations, e-bike seizures, and also to combat street takeovers and ATV takeovers. So they kind of grouped that in to one ordinance. I have some information on that. I would love to pass it on to the RTM, maybe work with the administration to.
I just think someone's gonna get killed. Kid's gonna get killed. Twice today, they don't follow the street laws. My stop sign. Great stops. While they're looking at cell phones at the same time. Yeah, so this seems like a big, dangerous thing that's going. Anyway, so then, appreciate your persistence and thanks for the hard work.
Thanks, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the grant agreements set forth in item 5 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous, 9-0. Thank you, Chief. Good.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 6. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Whereas the first selectman to enter into a proposed agreement with the federal government on behalf of USDOT, FHWA for the Safe Street for All grant. And whereas the town of Fairfield has been awarded a grant in the total amount of $350,000 by the federal government. And whereas the grant requires funds and in-kind services from the town in the amount of $7,500 for the creation of a safety action plan. Now therefore be resolved that the first selectman is authorized to make, execute, and approve on behalf of the town of Fairfield any and all contracts or amendments thereof to secure said grant. Motion to hear this item. Ms. Ruggiero, seconded, Mr. Rutola. The materials for this item are included in the posted backup beginning on page, I believe, 76. And we have Mr. Hurley here to present this to us. Welcome, Bill. Good to see you.
Good evening, financiers. I'm gonna do a little humor here. Lori, John, and Craig, congratulations, or my condolences on your positions. Only kidding, of course. Good luck in your next term.
Thank you.
The town of Fairfield applied for and was awarded a federal grant named the Safe Streets for All. This non-discretionary grant involves the creation of a safety action plan, which is a prelude to potential demonstration and implementation projects. The Safety Action Plan will identify and pinpoint serious injury and fatality crashes and provide goal setting, safety analysis, and involve public engagement and collaboration. The town was one of the few municipalities to be selected for this grant in the Metropod region. The design phase can begin once the final agreements are in place. Purpose of the project is to reduce the number of potential serious injuries and fatalities along Fairfield roadways. This will include even the state highways, with the exception of the limited access highways such as I-95 and the Merritt Parkway. This project will advance and provide information for the town's existing Complete Streets Ordinance, Vision Zero, and Safe Systems Approach Program. The project will also encourage walking, biking, public involvement to reduce greenhouse gases and increase public health benefits. Using Yukon Crash Repository, Fairfield will conduct safety analysis addressing the adverse safety impacts, particularly those that affect pedestrians, cyclists, vulnerable users, and underserved communities. The grant award dictated how much Fairfield received. The grant will reimburse the town $350,000. There is a town share of $87,000 for additional funding, which we estimate maybe $25,000, maybe even more, will be covered by in-kind services by town employees and costs. As I mentioned before, the project costs are $437,500. Federal grant reimburses $350,000. The town share use $87,500 and can reduce that cash amount, providing in-kind services. The remainder, if there's any left over, will come out of the $1 million bond issuance recently passed for the Complete Streets. So I'm here to answer any questions someone might have about the grant.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Mr. Mottola?
So can you just give your 14 points is general, which is good. Can you give me like a specific example of what you were doing? Sure.
We will hire a consultant who will study all the crash data that UConn provides. And they'll look at police department reports. They'll talk to bike and ped committee members. They'll talk to the engineering department, DPW, various departments in town, and get an idea of where the trouble spots are, so to speak. From there, they will host probably about a dozen public meeting or informational meetings. Sometimes they're called charrettes or a little gathering, maybe by RTM districts or something like that, where the neighborhood would come in and they'll say, you know, Bronson Road's really a bad, or Route 1 is, I can't even cross Route 1. And so with all that information, they will analyze it with street classification. We intend to either do data collection or through a computer traffic management software, get volumes and speeds. They can also get some of this information from DOT or MetroCog as well. Put it all together and then come up with troubled areas and potential countermeasures for those areas. So if it's an area that has a really sharp increase in speed, for instance, around a corner, or there might be some safety things that they could do for the vehicles. If unfortunately, we've had a couple of pedestrian hits in town, and maybe it is a wide crosswalk, maybe it's a limited visibility crosswalk. So they would propose these countermeasures, which will then eventually, we can't do design per se, but they can do conceptuals. And then from that, we would do demonstration projects and implementation. The implementation could result from, I think the minimum is like $2.5 or $5 million up to like $10 million. And so
In grant
in
opportunity?
grant opportunities, but in order to get to that step, you have to do this step, exactly.
Okay.
So that's what the proposal is to get some short-term improvements and then obviously long-term, relatively short, but long in terms of a year or two.
Figure out what you need to do, and then you might get grant monies to do.
That's right.
Project. So just, be quiet. What you've done up at Reading Road, really, everyone should drive up there. It's good.
Oh, thank you.
Roundabout.
The roundabout, yeah.
I like it. I think you need to do the same thing at where Bronson Road and Sturgis Road meet.
Okay.
That's kind of dangerous right there. So
That one is on our radar, especially since the town recently purchased that property. So once we start getting those plans developed, we will incorporate, whether it's a creation of an all-way stop, whether it's a mini roundabout, or whether we do medians or something like that. That's definitely on our radar.
okay, thank you for indulging me.
Oh, no problem at all.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Ms. Ruggiero?
Thank you.
Sure.
When will this start, all of this work?
The agreements are just about, matter of fact, I have the agreement here. We just have to go through the process so that the first selectman can sign the agreement, send it in. Concurrently, probably within the next week or so, I'll put out an we'll put out an RFP to solicit consultants. And most likely right after the holidays, we will then select a consultant and then give them with the agreement in place, give them the go ahead to do the work. So I'm assuming certainly this winter that they could get started. It will probably take about a year process for the final report to complete.
Since the 87,000, did we have that anywhere on the budget, or where is that money gonna come from?
Well, like I said, it's in-kind services that
25 grand.
but that's estimated. It's gonna be based on actual time.
Mhm.
So if engineering, DPW, finance, police, whoever ends up spending, say, $50,000 worth, we'll have that, and then it would just be the remaining amount. I listed it as the 87 because that's the in-kind, and that would represent the worst case if we got zero money. And with that, the Complete Streets bond resolution was 1 million. And so we any leftover remaining amount would come out of that budget.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right,
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ruggiero. Mr. Myers?
I have two questions. So how long do we think this study will take? And secondly, it says there's a few municipalities to be selected for this grant. Do we know what other municipalities have received this grant?
The city of Bridgeport received it this go around, and the town of Westport did receive it. I think it was late last year.
Right.
So they're just a little bit ahead of us. They haven't gotten the final report yet. So the first question, it takes about a year to get the report.
Okay.
And then I think there were four, this go around, there were four in the whole state of Connecticut. We were one of the four, so.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Mr. Walsh?
Good evening, Bill. Thanks for being here. So how much does the consultant cost to do the study that takes about?
We're figuring between 300 and 400,000.
That's gonna be pretty much most of the money.
Yeah, but that's,
Okay, there's not gonna be any money going into resolution of any of these things.
no, it was very specific on it's a safety action plan.
Okay.
So, because we were hoping maybe to get some streets components, or maybe be able to do some demonstration projects, but the federal government made it clear that this was, it's like a planning grant, so to speak. And with current discussions with the FHWA and the Connecticut DOT, I was able to have them at least incorporate what we call conceptual design, maybe 15 or 20% design, as opposed to preliminaries like 30, semifinals like 65, 70, and then obviously finals 90 or 100. So percent.
So with neighborhoods and stuff gonna start showing up to express their concern. Are we gonna, like, is this gonna get to the point where we're gonna start seeing a lot of speed bumps in neighborhoods? Down roads, down our public.
It's possible. It could be that or other traffic calming measures, as mentioned before, many roundabouts. There's something called a chicane, or you could narrow down a road. A lot of ones that we've done in the past have been like reducing the intersection, where the intersection might be, say, 70 feet wide, and we reduced it, say, to 50 feet wide, which makes a tighter radius for a turn, so you don't go as fast. And it also reduces the pedestrian crossing. Instead of 70 feet, now it's only 50 feet, which obviously the less time a pedestrian's in the roadway, the better off we are. So all these type of measures would be considered and looked at. And as I said, there's what they call an engineer's toolbox. You could have like anywhere from usually about a dozen well-known traffic calming devices. That would be most likely determined by the consultant, and that would have to be approved by the legal traffic authority. So there's two groups that would approve it.
Is this study gonna identify a priority level in spots in 10? That's first. In spot 2.
Yeah, that's a good question, and to let you know that in the RFP, we will be specifically asking for prioritization of the intersections or the roadway segments where there are high crash incidents, serious injuries. So those are gonna get the most priority. And then it probably does a combination of, volume and low hanging fruit, where maybe you can solve a problem or reduce a problem with only a couple of $1,000s, some additional signs, pavement, the curb layout or something like that. And then you get into more detail of, maybe $50,000 or $100,000 more complex problem. So we're gonna have them prioritized based on the severity of the accident first. And then we'll have them prioritized in terms of like benefit cost or economics, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Priorities of both.
Okay. And then will the report also, when it talks about severity, give suggested, or is that for town?
We are going to, in the RFP, ask them to have recommendations. And now typically what happens, because we've done some road safety audits with the University of Connecticut as well. They'll have their list of recommendations, and then we usually take another dive in and say, this will work, or maybe this might not work, you know, because they're conceptual. So they'll have to, and then they'll have to be we'll have to provide a little bit more detail to see if they would work or not.
Sure.
And then from there, if it's something rather simple or straightforward, we could do it design in-house. If it's something complicated, then we may, or we get a grant, we might have a consultant do it.
When this report is completed, are you or your department, or someone to be able to come to us and say, here's the report. And this is our estimation, solve all of this.
Yeah, that's the intent.
You'll put a number on it, and then you'll be able to come back on like a yearly basis. Tell us how we're doing, how much money we've spent, how much money there still is to go, what kind of progress we're making on this.
Well, the report will tell how much money, it'll probably give it a range, you know, of costs. And they'll probably group them into, you know, high priority, you know, medium and low priority. They'll have that information, and then we'll work with the finance and the capital planning group and the first selectman's office in trying to decipher the best way to give budget. Very similar to you know, our traffic signal inventory program. We got the information and we divided up in 3 years, or the tide gates or whatever. I imagine the same thing will happen here.
Madam Chairman, through you, I'm gonna request that they'll provide us with that report. The documents, so that we can have it, look at it and figure out how. But
It'll be available to the public because.
yeah, but I mean, I think if we
require-
don't get it, you might have it, and I might not find out you have it for a year and a half or 3 years. Next time you have a grant, you wanna come and say it's based on some report, you had half of them. So unless,
So can
I'm
I,
not going on your site all the time to check.
Yeah, no, I understand.
so
I
just,
have no problem.
can I
with that.
follow up on Mr. Cause I had a similar question, but right now, so there's two things. And this is the second time I didn't bring my capital planning worksheet, which I was carrying around for months, but we have, so we recently approved $1 million bond for Safe Streets.
Mhm.
And when we approved that money, it was characterized as sort of money to get started, if you will. So one of the questions I had asked at the time is there a plan, you know, for high priority? And the answer was not really, but there's some low hanging fruit, and this allows us to do some of the work to get started. But it sounds like this project will develop that plan and might provide a little bit of this 87,000 to cover our matching.
Right.
But we still have money that's already been approved, a small pot of money to do other things, right? Like quick projects. So that was just the one thing. The other thing, and this gets to Mr. Walsh's question too. We currently in our capital plan, I don't remember the numbers, but we had money in the capital plan for complete streets. But those were high level estimates, and those didn't really have a study attached to them. So is it fair to say that this study, when it's done and it provides, you know, this information, will help to refine the numbers that are in that capital plan already? Because we do have, if I remember, we had a couple $1 million over a couple of years, right?
Yeah, don't have it in front of me. I think it was roughly 4.6 over 3 years.
Over 3 years, okay.
And that was to start to put, you know, to placehold money in the next few years. Obviously, you know, one of our goals, same with some of the money from the million is gonna be, you know, the initial planning money towards where we have state bonded funds. So our hope is that the more prepared we are, the more we can target grant funds, be it federal or just simply state, or state, you know, state bonding.
Does that mean additional planning beyond this study? There's
So-
other studies
So,
or?
and yeah, that's one thing. I would wanna caution that this 350 is going to roll out this plan.
It's not gonna be a comprehensive.
This is a step in identifying specifically for the really serious injuries and deaths and that level. It'll obviously inform us on a lot of what's going on in town. But even there, if you wanna start getting into dollars on areas, simply, coming up with what areas are need to be targeted, you're
That's a bigger endeavor. I get it.
several miles of road and it's millions to do it, but one road needing a roundabout versus one road adding sidewalks and some striping, and two drastically different things. And 350 is gonna start to get us on that like high level plan where we can start to then drill down further than that.
But I guess so to Jim's point though, yes, we should see the study when it's done, but I guess tell me if this is wrong. The way I'm thinking of it is the way we're gonna learn about that study is that the results of it somehow are gonna be incorporated into the capital plan, which we will be reviewing on an ongoing basis because that's gonna inform the numbers that are already in that plan, but will be refined over time as we figure out exactly what that money is gonna be spent on.
Yeah, I think you're gonna continue to see specific to complete streets, more money showing up in the plan over time. It's premature to just start dropping, big numbers in because we're also where grant, offsets are, and they are significant. Reading Road being an example, $1 million is, it's a pretty significant amount of money to offset, and we believe that there's a lot of additional money in that, in that world as well. And then we're also trying to find, like, if we have an area that's discovered that this is part of the plan, and we were gonna pave there in 3 years anyways, we're trying to do that. We're trying to start to be much more synergistic in our approach. So
Okay.
this is a very key element of being able to do that. It provides dollars for the planning pieces. We've tried to do the best we can in-house with some of that, but we don't necessarily have the subject matter expertise to take it to the next level. You don't have the staff hours to necessarily do that, and we're trying to.
Okay. Mr. Walsh?
Is the finance department gonna be monitoring what the spend has been? Total number of grants over time, because I think we should have something which is keeping track of all of this entire program going forward. Takes 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Know what this was, what we paid for it.
We are onboarding in a few weeks manager. Part of their role is going to be comparative to past with the structuring. It's gonna be more of the overall administration of grants, so grant dollars in general. We're hoping that they're just a more cohesively and, entered into this. I think what you're getting at is more than just grants though. I mean, this is
Total
local
programs.
dollars, is it? And that's something that we can look at a way to sort of.
I'd like to be able to do it. I mean, we obviously could do it with regards to spending on streets, the bonds we've done for streets, or we could do it for sidewalks. I'd like to do it for safety streets. I'd like to see, be able to pull up some type of spreadsheet, Joe. These are the dollars that we invested on each of these individual projects. These were the grant funding we got. This is what bonded or have outstanding or spent on it, and be able to look at it every once in a while.
So can I just, and I don't want to get too far off track with this, because this is, I think, a different topic than this grant, but to Jim's point, so I think as everybody knows, one of the improvements that's been made in the capital planning process this year is Sabrina is now giving us with every capital plan a really nice tracking spreadsheet of spending on approved projects. We never used to have that before. So projects that are active and authorized, those are, the spending against them is being tracked, and all these are multi-year projects. So we're gonna be seeing that every time we get a version of that capital plan. We've already gotten it. So we've been getting that, I think, since February or March. So that's one good thing. The other thing, I'll just throw out a plug, we have charter revision going on. One of the things I was a proponent for in the last charter revision was to have a capital budget in our charter. And I think if that comes to pass this time, a capital budget would enforce the type of discipline that we have in the operating budget, where we have books and record, we don't have spreadsheets, we have books and records that track spending. We'll have a budget book that we can go back, and the history is there. So we don't have to be guessing at these things. But I think right now, what the administration has done, when we get those spreadsheets, I know we're always focused on what's coming up and what we're gonna have to be approving. But the back half of those spreadsheets has really nice detail on all the things we've already approved, how those projects are progressing, what's been spent today, what the status is, and whether they're on track. So it's probably a good idea next time we have a capital update to spend a little time walking through some of that, because the detail is there. I think it's going to provide what you're looking for. And if we do get to the point where we have a capital budget, I think, we'll have the categorization that's a little neater. So you can see over time, you'll have a record in our accounting system over time, what these various initiatives have cost. And
I just like to get some type of spreadsheet, and now that we're at the beginning of the program where we just gave $1 million.
Yeah.
We're about to give more money. We're about to begin spending $1. Be able to look at this, just be able to track it and say, okay, how are we doing against the plan that Bill paid $400,000 for?
And that is
How much does
in,
it
that's
cost?
in.
How much did we think it was
spreadsheet.
gonna cost? And how much did it cost? How far along are we? 10% there, 50% there, 90%?
And that detail, so as I said, next time we should make it a point to spend a little time going through that, because that's been getting provided to us, but we haven't actually walked through it. So her spreadsheet, because one of the things, I had the same frustration, we would approve things and then never hear about them again.
Sure.
So that spreadsheet now has every open authorized project. And some of those authorizations go back years. And if it's open and authorized, you can see what was originally approved, when we approved it in 2001. Here's the spending that's been trickling out. And she has commentary on the side to talk about project status. So I think if we start to take a little time, I mean, we should, board members can study that when the backup comes, but it would be a good idea, I think, David, during one of these meetings the next iteration we get to actually spend some time walking through that spreadsheet so everyone knows what they're looking at and can focus in on the projects that they want. Because I agree with you, it's been a personal frustration of mine that in the past, we would approve something and then it was like a black hole. You just never knew whether the project even got done.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
Mrs. Becker, I know you must be pretty far into the budget. Are we gonna be budgeting dollars for safety streets? Is there gonna be like an account where we budget money for safety streets?
We're not at that stage, but I would early pass likely right now in this current year.
When you say unlikely.
I would think that's probably unlikely in this current year,
Uh,
but we're not at that stage yet to start deciding that.
Because at some point, if we're gonna continue to do this work, and that's why this spreadsheet would be good, to see how much we're spending on a yearly basis. This becomes like paving, this becomes like sidewalk repair. Yes, there's catch-up time, bonds and grants we try to get us over the hump. But at some point, it seems like it should be a budgeted item. And I agree, maybe it's not this coming budget year, but that's why like having this information is gonna be necessary to be able to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Any questions on this grant? Hey, Bill, just one quick question. As I was looking at the back of it, it looks like it's a markup. What is this? It looks like it's redlined still.
Oh, the agreement?
Yeah.
That's the way they sent it out, cause
They send it to us that way? Because it was just odd. I was like,
Yeah,
are we
but-
making these changes or did they?
no, they made some changes and then we made some in a report. I've tried to get rid of it. That's the one for the final one. On the printout that I have, I don't think it came out that way, but on the computer it does. You might have to go up and hit hide.
No, that's fine. I just
Changes,
wasn't
yeah.
clear on the process.
No, it bothered me. I don't know why they did it that way.
All right.
If you want a clean copy or when
No, I'm
it
good.
comes out.
It wasn't hard to read. It just seemed odd because it seemed like their form, so I
Yeah, it's
wasn't
their
sure if we were
form.
marking changes to their stuff, but it sounds like they were. Okay, all those in favor of approving the resolution set forth in item 6 of the agenda, please say aye. Okay, it is unanimous. Thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
All right, same to you. Okay, we will move on to item 7. To hear, consider, and act upon a reallocation of the ARPA funds per Exhibit A attached in the backup. Motion to hear this item, Mr. Curley, texted by Mr. Myers. Okay, the materials for this item are included in the posted backup beginning on page 95. For board members, you have be able to find the sheet. It's that folded over sheet that you have. So this is, I guess, the last ARPA reallocation. Better be, since it's our last meeting of the year, right? So, Mr. Becker, are you gonna take us through this?
So, yeah, the items that you're gonna be focusing on today that you haven't seen so far on page 2. Begin items number 12, 13, 15, and 16. Item number 12, townwide security upgrades. And that's for just shy of 134,000. Item number 13 was the $50,000, which is for the master flood and erosion resiliency plan. So just on that piece, that's 50,000 to be paired with, and that's actually, you've got one item coming out soon to merge. Basically, essentially, we're taking 2 bond allocations plus this 50 to get the 400,000 for that master plan. And from the accuracy standpoint, we've gone out to RFP, chosen a vendor, we have their quotes. And this includes their quote with the alternates and a small contingency for some additional modeling that may come up. So this is a reliable extra 50,000 that we would need in order to do that. The additional item number 14 is 100,000 towards the Police Safe Corridor program that members may be familiar with that. That's a existing program that we've been putting some additional dollars towards on the technology side for the police department. The item number 15 is just a cleanup item, $296.02, just to add up to the exact dollar amount for the, so it's just a cleanup item on the schedule. And same for the Jennings Beach concession upgrades. That project's complete, so that's 11,400 and change, and that's a cleanup item downward to free the money up and apply that those funds to the rest of the schedule. So it's essentially 2 cleanup items and then 3 full items within here. All the other items have at this stage been those figures that are there are from prior approvals and different departments over the course of the last year or so. Have gone through and are confident in the ability to spend or encumber and then spend all the items that are in the schedule. Some of them have some some balances in there, but again, we're those at the stage and double, triple, quadruple check that every way.
Okay. All right, so I saw the chief was hanging around. I didn't know if he was just interested in our meeting or if he was waiting to speak on these items.
Yeah, he's here, and also Dave Kelly, because the townwide security upgrades piece is largely an IT driven piece that involves mostly the security, camera footprint, which is driven by Dave Kelly under IT on that side and in conjunction with the police department and.
Okay.
And then
So
safe corridor.
Are you here for Q&A or do you wanna speak on these items?
I don't need to speak, but
Okay. All right, well, why don't does the board, questions from the board on these final reallocations? All right. That was easy. Okay, so we can vote on this then. For the last time, all in favor?
Can I make a comment about this? I mean,
Sure.
it's been something that's kind of been building for a while, is that now that we're at the end, right? I can't wait for this to come to an end. I really can't wait because this whole, when I look at this and I watch some of the other communities I know dealt with this, in the end, and I know it's covered two administrations and I was part of voting on this myself along the way. It kind of became bastardized a little bit along the way in that it became 30-something projects, 33 projects. It should have really been in the budget. That we should have used our capital plan to direct these funds to things we knew we needed, such as WPCA projects, such as school projects, things we needed. And this just became some list of things that should have been in the budget, like fire command truck that should have been budgeted. Or, other little things that would come up along the way. I mean, I'm not gonna get into them because there's 33 of them. Yes, there were some great things about Perry's being bulkhead. Some of the flooding and erosion stuff should have been done, but I understand the reasons why it couldn't have been done, but it's just not the way we should take $24 million found money and spend it on these nice little gifts all around town for all sorts of little things that are not budgeted, when this board, as a board, we all know, and I feel bad about this. I generally feel bad that we let our priorities, we didn't put $1 towards really the priorities that we know we need, and now we'll have to spend extra money on. I'm not saying these things aren't good things to do. I'm not saying replacing 7 or 8 or 9 playgrounds wasn't the thing to do, or a kitchen here and the seat. All these are great things. But I would think that a corporation that got some windfall would go based on a priority of how they wanted to spend the money, not some CEO who cherry picks little projects all over town and sprinkles little bits of presents, all over the place. So that's my problem with the whole thing. And it's gotten more and more like this as we've gotten further out. And I'm just glad it's over, because now we can go back to regular, basic budgeting, capital plan stuff. Do it the way it's supposed to be done. Thank you.
Got a comment too.
I don't disagree, by the way. I wish we had taken this money and done 1 or 2 strategic things.
Like air conditioning in the school.
And the decision, and listen, I think,
Pick one of those things.
the decision was made to try and do a bunch of things that we might not otherwise do, and that was the approach that was taken back in 2021, and it's easy to look back now. Here we are, it's over, and I'm not thinking we're gonna get another $25 million gift like this, so we may not have to worry about this again, but if we ever do get this opportunity, this is probably not the way I would do it either. Mr. Joel?
I don't disagree with what you're saying. I could say one thing though, some municipalities use this money for operating expenses, and now,
That's far.
God bless them,
That's
they have huge issues coming up for their budget, so we didn't do that. We never would have done that, so, but I hear what you're saying. I always thought initially, we knew we have this huge liability of air conditioning in schools. Why not take a ton of this money and something like that? But
100% agree. And it's gotten worse as we've heard how much air conditioning costs. It's gotten worse as we've heard how bad the WPCA issue is. We sit here during these meetings, and I'm like, would have been nice to have that $24 million to throw at this problem. That is a serious problem.
All right.
Well, I mean, hindsight, we didn't have a huge school on a list right now. We didn't have WPCA. We didn't know what we know now.
Some of that stuff
is fun, so I'm
Air
not
conditioning.
defending don't know if any, there were probably many other things on the list that we could have, like the air conditioning.
Well, the other thing, and it's easy to go back and be critical, I do want to move on, but the other thing that I heard from our former CFO in particular, and which did resonate with me, was that, there were operational challenges with this stuff too. I mean, if you had taken all this money and been doing a couple of big projects, strategic projects with it, that takes up time and resources and people that couldn't then also do the other things on the capital list. So I think it was, it changed over time. There was a lot of different viewpoints and, projects were initially on this list that turned out not to be feasible. And then it was like, what do you do with the money? So I think at the end of the day, we got the money. I think our community benefited. We got, police equipment, we got playgrounds, we got, a bunch of things that we would otherwise, our taxpayers would have funded. So it is what it is. Anyway. All right, all those in favor of approving the reallocation of ARPA funds set forth, posted back up to item 7 of the agenda, please raise your hand. It is unanimous, one final time. Thanks, everybody. All right, move to item 8, to hear, consider, and adopt a resolution amending and restating a resolution entitled Resolution Appropriating $6,717,899 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, to increase the appropriation and bond authorization for the Jennings Beach project by $100,000 for a total appropriation and bond authorization under the resolution of $3,817,899, and to expand the scope of the Jennings project. Motion to hear this item. Ms. Ruggiero, seconded by Mr. Curley. The full resolution is included in the posted backup on page 108. Mr. Becker, was there backup then? I didn't see anything. For the 100,000? Okay.
So there is actually on the capital schedule already approved under capital non-recurring, so 2 larger authorizations. There's a bucket of funds for 250,000 and then separate bucket of funds for 100,000. And now under ARPA 50,000 amount, we are anticipating the master flood planned to cost 400, and so we are looking to essentially raise the $250,000 amount by 100, so it's in one bucket that we can go to. And this is if you go with
What is the scope expansion that this refers to?
so essentially, we're looking at a comprehensive. So originally there was a smaller plan. This one was in the beach area, and it was only gonna be a very narrow scope. There was another plan, it was gonna be a very narrow scope. We're looking to kind of look at it at the 50,000 foot level and look at the entire town holistically, create a matrix and that does take into account cost, feasibility, grant opportunity for not just not just coastal flood and erosion, but also riverine flooding, the viaducts, the impacts. And so the idea is essentially, instead of having several different types of plans, is to have one comprehensive that looks at the big picture for the town for flooding as a whole. Because what happens at the riverine level does affect people at the coastal level and vice versa. And the town focuses a lot of times on just, Fairfield Beach Road flooding or the big one, quote unquote, coming across. But actually, we've learned our inland flooding is and our riverine issues are actually quite significant as well. And so the idea is that you take this comprehensively. The town has what master. So there's a bucket of funds for 250 and one allocation and a bucket for another allocation for 100. The idea is to have 350 properly labeled for the comprehensive that we're looking for, and
Got it.
That's
Okay.
ARPA. We actually will, we plan at a future date to come forward. And when we do, we will eventually ask to deauthorize the 100,000 bucket. We don't intend to touch that. But usually that's done at the water cleanup within the non-recurrings. So
Okay.
why we're not asking to that.
All right. Questions, Mr. Walsh?
So am I mistaken when I think that this, if we approve this, that I'll have 350 plus the 50 from ARPA money, that 400?
Correct. It's to get to 400. Yeah, the bids came in at the RFP, I believe is I don't know the exact, but around 360 with the ad alternates. This going to 400 gives some additional room because we do anticipate some additional modeling that will come up when we get into certain areas.
So it gives a little.
So it gives a little bit of room to.
So this was supposed to be for the Jennings Beach project. So now it'll cover the whole town, correct?
This will cover that area and yes, the entire town. So it's not just coastal, but it includes river.
Alright, so you'll be able to tell us at the end, once we have this back, give us an approximate price for like how to basically keep the beach area dry. How much it's gonna cost? Keep the beach area dry during flooding, correct?
Think
I
that,
think it's a bargain if we can get it done for 400,000.
I don't think that anyone is gonna go that far, but we are going to come up with, the goal of this is to come up with, mitigation options to reduce, mitigate, the impact of coastal storms and erosion in that area. Yes.
It's also Rooster River and rivers through town as well, right?
And just like that, just like one of the asks, one of my particular concerns is the viaducts and what the options are. But no one's gonna necessarily in every area in town to say every single thing that we can possibly do to truly make them completely dry, quote, unquote, but certainly mitigation options.
So bottom line, you have an RFP. Now that you got the RFP, you need roughly 400,000 to cover it. And this extra 100,000 plus the ARPA allocation gets you to roughly that amount. Okay. Questions, Mr. Walsh?
How long is this report gonna take to get?
Ultimately, I would say we're probably looking at about a year.
About a year?
I think to final report stage, and we're looking at more, 6 months, sometime maybe over the summer for draft phase. We want to be comprehensive. I mean, that was actually one of the things. It started with, flood and erosion was looking at one section of town. The goal was to broaden it, to go with the riverine piece.
Okay, but I mean, to the question, like
We wanna be
a year to get a final.
I would think, within a year, you'll have that, yes.
I think this board should have a presentation once that's prepared by whoever does the report. I remember we got reports on this board about flood and erosion things down at the beach area, and there were numbers coming in from the Army Corps of Engineers estimates. I'm just off the top of my head, like $600 million. And I would like to see what this report says that number is gonna be.
But I would just stop at that as an example. We're not asking him to do that. So, I mean, if you wanna go down the road of pie in the sky, we're gonna have them build, the
Fortress.
Army Corps, yeah, essentially the fortress out there. I mean, this, we've sat in meetings talking about, wave, impact studies and doing things like that. But we're not paying for it. The Army Corps is not paying for it. We're not even sure if the Army Corps wanted to do it, if DEEP would even allow them to do it off here. You get into multi-agency issues and no one has hundreds and hundreds of millions to go and do that. So We're trying in this, there may be some, yes, if, 100 million fell out of the sky, you could do this and this at some very, very broad strokes level. But our biggest ask here is to be at some level realistic.
Can I just want to acknowledge, I see Becky is still with us. Do you want to comment on this at all in response to the question?
Yeah, if it's helpful. I mean, I think one of
Yes.
the things that we wanted to do with this RFP, and it might be helpful context, the Army Corps plan basically was $546 million, and that was in 2022 dollars. Even more now. And frankly, it wouldn't have been a plan that our town would have wanted to adopt. It would have had 8-foot walls down by the beach area. People wouldn't be able to see over them. We wouldn't. Yeah, maybe, yes, we would have maybe been dry, but then, a Cat 3 hurricane could have come and overtopped those because it only would have been done to the 500-year storm. So we're taking sort of a step back and a slightly different approach for this, which is that we want to protect the 15% of our housing that sits in the floodplain, but we want to protect it to maybe a lower level that'll keep nor'easters from coming in, that'll keep, some of the storms. But frankly, if a big Cat 1 hurricane comes, we're probably going to get the water coming back in again, because I don't think we want 8-foot walls down by the beach area. But what we do want is protection up to a 12-foot level. And 12-foot will keep a lot of the smaller storms out, which is going to, keep the beach area dry for the most part. But the big storms will still overtop that. And I think that's a trade-off that we as a town, have to make. Do we want 8-foot walls all around our beach area, or do we want a beach area that looks like it does today, that keeps, some of the sea level rise implications away, that keeps some of the erosion implications away, and that gives us the same kind of landscape and feeling we've got as a town, but doesn't, and frankly, it won't cost anywhere near that 546 to do it at a 12-foot elevation level. I don't know if that's helpful context.
I think it is. Does that help you, Mr. Walsh? Okay.
There's some
Mr. Myers?
Do we have examples of any other towns coastal like us that have done what this study is gonna hopefully come back and say would be, feasible and do some of these like types of storms, not the big storms, but just a little something, and then if they have,
Yes.
how much it cost?
Yeah, so a lot of towns are doing things like raising roads to make sure that you have safe evacuation routes. We've done that. Norwalk is doing that right now. We've done that. We're looking at that in Brantford. And a lot of towns are sort of at the same stage we are. They're just doing their sort of master plans now. So I don't have specific costs for what it would necessarily take. But that's the whole point of this. What we're going to get at the back end of this is what are called level 5 costs, which are order of magnitude costs. So we have 15 sections of town that we'll be having kind of a mitigation plan for. And that includes the riverine, the underpasses, David mentioned, the downtown, and several sections of the coast. And we're going to have a primary and a backup mitigation option with level 5 costs. And again, what level 5 is order of magnitude. So it's a 10%, call it 10 to 15% design. So we are going to need to further, take these areas that we decide, once we have a prioritized list coming out of this, we'll have the 10%, costs, if you will. We will need to then take those areas and prioritize them as a town and decide what is it we want to do. And we would absolutely be coming to Board of Finance and RTM to review the options that this plan presents, discuss as a town, which ones do we want to prioritize? How do we want to fit them into our capital budget? What's the timeline? Is this a 5-year out project, a 10-year out project? And then we would start to get permit level drawings and better design level drawings and actually, progress the prioritized projects that we feel are the best thing for the town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
One of the things that we're then looking to do even with that is then decide which items might make sense for us to do design. So downtown resiliency, which is already in the pipeline, we've continued at ARPA getting ourselves, the collapsing the phases, getting design work, getting to the point that then we can target the grant dollars, which is a big step for us. Okay. I did want to add, it's 100,000 was labeled as flood control study, and then the 250 resiliency Jennings Beach in the capital plan. So the idea is essentially the Jennings Beach 50 gets labeled as the master, and eventually we'll ask to sunset them.
Any other questions before we vote on this item? So all those in favor of approving the resolution set forth in item 8 of the agenda, please raise your hand. Okay, it is unanimous. Thank you, Becky. Thanks for being here with us. Very helpful to have you. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to move on to item 9, which is to consider by the meeting schedule. Motion to hear this item, Ms. Lindley, second, Ms. Ruggiero. Okay, the draft meeting schedule was posted supplementally in a standalone document on the website, and it's also in your printed materials in front of you. Again, just a draft, happy to take comments. This it's a fairly consistent schedule with last year. It ties the budget timing around the charter requirements and the RTM vote, and when we need to set the mill rate. It tries to avoid holidays we've gotten tripped up on in the past, so we've worked around the Jewish holidays, fall, and it continues to leave a break in July and August with scheduled meetings. So that may be something that we want to reconsider. I'll open that up for suggestions. If we want to schedule something, we can always cancel it so as to maybe avoid the need to do special meetings if something were to arise in the summer. I think it was 2 years ago was the only summer I can remember in recent memory that we didn't have a special meeting. So that's just something to think about. But this is it. So open for comments and discussion.
I have a question.
Yes.
Last year, did you actually have all 6 of those budget meetings, or was one of them sort of like if it overlapped?
Yeah, so what we did, so the last budget, which here I have labeled as budget makeup. So the budget makeup meeting is sort of a relic from when we used to have snow days and we didn't have remote meetings, but we've never deleted it because it's a good meeting to keep scheduled if there are follow-up items. So typically the way it's worked is we can get all the departments in the first 5 meetings. Then the 6th meeting, we always have things that get hung over. We have departments that need to come back for follow-up, and we have just things that got deferred for whatever reason. We ran out of time. So we've typically used the 6 budget meetings. Last year, we did not use the 7th, but we kept it scheduled. So that would be the March 31. And that's good to have also because it's after the public budget hearing and prior to the budget vote. So this is one extra meeting than we actually used last year, but it's consistent with the schedule from last year. Mr. Matola?
And just the other change, and I want to make this clear, is that budget meetings are gonna, proposals to start them at 7 o'clock instead of 7:30. And I don't know if that's a huge issue for anybody. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah, I did actually try to do this a couple of years ago to help with, just trying to get out of here before everyone was asleep. And I know for at least 1 or 2 members, it might have been a struggle, but I figured I'd throw it out here again in case that works for everyone. So these are, this would be a 7 p.m. start only for the budget hearings. Ms. LeClaire?
So it is a little bit difficult for me to get here by 7. I'm willing to give it a try. The only one that I would kind of request if we could do 7:30 is for the vote.
Okay. Just okay.
I don't know,
So that's
getting it.
Yep, April 2nd. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? What does everybody think about keeping the summer break intact and addressing any needs through a special meeting if required? Is that okay with everyone, or would you prefer? Okay, I'm seeing nods. Okay. Okay.
Were there any last year? Any special meetings?
Last year we had one special meeting. It was the Sturgis vote. And then I think because we were meeting already, we had a POCD presentation. 2 years ago, we didn't have any. I do recall several years before that, things came up that we had to approve. So they were ad hoc. It gets a little more difficult, but we did it. So.
And one other stupid question,
Sure.
like on a snow day, do we just do it all remote, or is it Does somebody have to be here, so therefore the meeting has to get canceled?
So we could go remote if the weather is, if conditions are dangerous and people want to do it remotely. If we do it with enough advance notice, we could just schedule it remotely. And if it happens at the last minute, which I think did happen to us once, we can join, anybody can join any meeting remotely, but we would have to arrange for the room to be here in case someone wanted to show up.
I think once last year, there was a real bad rainstorm and
Yeah.
I think the only one who went to the meeting was Bill Gerber.
Yeah.
That's
They were running the camera.
If we know 24 hours in advance.
Yeah, we would have to know.
otherwise,
Someone has to be in the,
Have to physically.
someone physically has to be running.
Turn on the.
We-
The one benefit of COVID was we figured out how to do remote meetings, so we don't need a snow day meeting if.
Okay. That meeting was great.
Okay. All right, so then, I will, I'll make a motion to amend the schedule to change the April 2nd budget vote to 7:30 PM. Can I have a second on that? Mr. Curley, all in favor of that change? Okay, that is unanimous, and I will make another motion to approve the amended schedule for the 2025 meetings. All in favor? Oh, no, a second on that? Mr.
Second.
Curley, okay, all in favor? Aye, okay, it is unanimous. All right, thanks, everybody. All right, so move on to item 10, to hear and consider operational rules for the Board of Finance. So there's no backup for this discussion item. This is on the agenda tonight. It's based on input from board members that I've heard, so I figured it would be good to put this out for discussion. And I'm actually gonna turn this, and this can be sort of an open forum, but I know Mr. Cola, you had at least one specific suggestion, so I'll turn it over to you to lead, start us off and lead the discussion, then we can go from there.
Yeah, I want you all to understand that I'm gonna say something and I'm not being critical of anybody. I don't wanna prevent us from doing our job and our work. I've been on this board for 10 years now. I really noticed that our meetings are going longer and longer. I went over the last couple of years and in 2024, we had 21 meetings, 10 of them went past 11 PM. So several of them went past midnight. A budget meeting went up to 1 AM in the morning. Last year, 2023, we had 24 meetings. 12 of them went past 11 PM. And then I just went back to 2019 to give a comparison. There's nothing really scientific about this. We had 22 meetings that year, and 8 of them went past 11 PM. And I know we've tried to do things over the last few years to try to make our meetings more efficient, like during the budget season, we've adopted what's called, Jim, it's called a Google spreadsheet, that if members had questions that weren't about huge issues on the budget, for example, they could put the question in the Google spreadsheet, it would get answered, it's posted so the people can see it. We also, during the budget sessions, have, we don't hear from all of the departments now. Some of the smaller ones we don't hear from. Years ago, we used to hear from all the nonprofits, if you remember. You know, that took a long
That'll take
time.
half a night.
Half a night. So we've done things to try to be more efficient, but it seems like it's not working. And I'm not sure why. And I think one of the things that, and it's for discussion purposes, that maybe we should consider is having a rule that says our meetings need to stop at 11 o'clock. The Board of Ed has such a rule. Their rule says regular meetings of the board shall be held in accordance with the schedule on file with the town clerk, normally scheduled on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. Second and fourth Tuesday should be reserved for board meetings. Then it says all Board of Education meetings shall adjourn at 11 PM unless there is a 2/3 vote of the board to suspend the rule. The RTM also has a similar rule. I thought Mary and Jim Walsh, I thought we had something like that several years ago. I remember when Mr. Flynn was sitting here, I remember one night that we were it was almost 11 o'clock at night and we didn't get the votes to continue the meeting, so we had to adjourn. So certainly I think if we consider something like this, it may make us more cognizant about the time. Certainly, I would not, if you want to go in this direction, I wouldn't require 2/3 vote to suspend this rule. If we're involved in something that we want to continue discussing, I think a majority in vote to go over the 11 PM time frame would be appropriate, not a 2/3. And I'm throwing it out there because I know 2 other town bodies have this similar rule. I think I could be totally wrong. It may make us focus a little bit more. I know Robert's Rules of Order, you could have something that on any particular agenda item that each member has 10 minutes of time to discuss that, deal with it. I don't think anybody here wants to do something like that. I certainly don't. That's kind of what I'm thinking of, and certainly want to hear your input. Maybe I'm in the minority here. But we've had a lot of meetings over the last few years that have gone late into the night. My mother used to tell me, nothing good happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, she'll be home. Anything good on the Board of Finance happens.
I don't know, I found my mother was wrong on that. Very, very wrong.
So that's,
Well,
those are my thoughts. So
yeah, no,
love to hear
I
from
just
all.
want to say one thing. I think, what I've tried to do is I think it's really important for everybody to be able to ask their questions and say what they want to say, especially during budget season, because we all have a vote and it's important that we're all heard, we get our questions answered, and everyone has adequate time to do the diligence that they think is important. What I have noticed, and I'll just throw this out there, is that when it gets late, we are human beings, people are checked out. And more than once, I have seen this board, and I'll include myself in this, we get ineffective when it gets late. We've sat at these meetings and we've asked questions on minor budget items. And then it gets to 11:30 at night and we got Anthony Calabrese or somebody up there with a big budget like Parks and Rec. And we breeze through it because people are tired and they're not paying attention, and we're not doing a service to the taxpayers, to ourselves. It's just, it doesn't work well. And that's my concern with it. I think that we have to figure out a way to get these meetings a little more efficient, because we don't do good work when it gets late. So I kind of agree with John's mother. But I think that, when we had the last charter revision, I remember the former first selectwoman tried to tackle this problem, and her approach to it was, we need to have less meetings, they need to be more efficient. In particular, there was a proposal in that last charter to run joint meetings as a way to reduce the number of meetings and make them more efficient. And, I personally wasn't wild about that idea. I think our board should have the time that we need to do it. And one of the things I argued back was like, no, that's not right. Let us take that on. We can figure out ways to make our meetings more efficient. And we tried. We put in the Google Sheet. That was supposed to stop us from asking questions about small items. I worked to cut down some of the number of departments and get rid of the small ones. So we got rid of a bunch of those. Some of the good input that came was, let's see some of these departments earlier. Instead of having Mark Barnhart come during the budget discussion, let's have him come on an earlier night so we can have a fulsome discussion and ask him questions. Because when we get him during a budget meeting, we're not really asking about the budget. We're just trying to get a catch up from him, So we've done all these things to try and get at this issue of having meetings that, where we can conclude our business in a reasonable amount of time and still be effective. And yet during all this, we've sort of gone in the opposite directions. We have less departments, we have more departments ahead of time, we have better data from the town. And I personally pushed hard on that. I said to, at the time, Brenda and Jared, if you want these meetings to be better, you have to do your part. You have to give us better data so we don't have to ask these questions. And they did their part and we got much better data. and yet we're going longer and longer. So I know Craig, you've mentioned in the past that maybe with the budget meetings in particular, we set up a block of time for each department, and so we kind of keep on a schedule and, so there's
a guideline.
a guideline. There's different things we can try, but I think the things that we've tried to do, or at least I've tried to do, have not worked. And I think there is a real downside to having these meetings go to inordinate hours. I'll add that to John's point. So I kind of agree. I think, listen, if we're at 11 o'clock and we need 10 more minutes, nobody's going to argue with that. But I do think it might be a way to, make us more disciplined and cognizant. So that's my 2 cents. Yes.
I certainly will acknowledge and recognize that I have done what you described in terms of being engaged in a discussion, asking questions early, and then as the night wanes after we get past 11:30, I may have questions in my notes that I choose not to ask. And then I perhaps throw it into the Google sheet, so we're trying to get an answer, but it's not in the public forum, it's not in the budget meeting itself. So I'm guilty of what you just described. I'm also a believer that work expands to fill time allowed. So if we have less time, we're going to be more efficient with that time to get the work done. When we have open-ended meetings, we can just keep going and keep talking. The other thing that I noticed as I compared this schedule to last year's schedule, we have the same number of meetings. We're starting a half an hour earlier for the meeting, so that's 3 hours more. So that's good. But in last year's schedule, we only had 5 budget sessions scheduled with 2 follow-ups if needed. Whereas this schedule has the same number of nights, it's 6 meetings with 1 follow-up if needed. So I think if we can use those 6 meetings and perhaps spread things out in a way that has us set up to efficiently finish by 11, I think we'll all be better off for it. So those are just my thoughts.
Mary?
I have 2 comments that I wanted to make. One is that I still feel very, very strongly that everyone has the right to question the budget and stuff. So if we did enact something like this, I think we should set aside overflow time. So if we have to go back to a budget on a different night to get some questions answered, finish our questions, we should have the time available to do that. And then the other one is that I disagree with John on just the simple majority, because I don't want it to be a one-party rule. I think if you have to have 6 votes, then if you change the hours, it can't be just one party. So
2/3, that's fair.
2/3 is better.
I was trying to make it easier.
I know.
'Cause I don't wanna prevent, I'm not gonna be the type of guy, it's 5:11. Okay, it's 11 o'clock, we're done. If someone has something they're doing, I wanna be able to finish that. That's all, but I don't disagree.
Yeah, and I like the idea of having the overflow, like if we designate that the budget makeup meeting on Monday, the 31st, anybody who we don't get to, they need to plan to be here on the 31st. And we may have several departments on different nights that get overflow, but this way, they don't show up at the next meeting and bump the schedule for everybody else. It's just kind of like if you get carried over, you're showing up on the 31st.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful with that. So last year, and the reason I say that is because the budget meetings, when you're scheduling them, we have to, we're asking the department heads and others to be here and we want to get to them on the night they're scheduled. Last year, budget, the number 6, I didn't label it here, but number 6 was department follow-up. And then the budget makeup was sort of the contingency one, and we didn't have that last one. So we did have the department follow-up one, and there were things that spilled over. What we tried to spill over was the finance department items, because, David was here anyway for all the meetings or whatever. But last year, if you remember the budget makeup, we wanted to do the whole interest investment income discussion, and the town didn't have the data available, so we ended up doing that on budget night. So we'll try our best, but that was, that was conceptually how it was supposed to work. I think yes, everybody needs to get their questions answered. If things need to carry over, they carry over. But the idea would not be to stop at 11 o'clock and just defer things till later. I think we really want to try to challenge ourselves to get through items in an efficient manner. And listen, if we're asking small questions about small dollar amounts, that's okay. Like, that's fine. We should be able to ask those. But if they're asked and answered in a Google Sheet, they don't need to be repeated at the meeting, because those Google Sheets, the Q&A, that is part of the public record. It goes out in the backup. Everybody can see who asked the question, what the answer is. The documents are there. So I think those are some of the things that can help us, get there. I don't know. Jim?
I think, let's me just address the budget. The budget's the way the budget is because we cut budget days. And that was all because of Mr. DeWitt and his recommendation to cut the number of days we heard the budget. We used to have 2 more budget days when I was on this board. 2 more nights, 2 more full nights. But now we don't. And I told Chris right at this table, Chris, the problem's gonna be, it's like, you won't be limited in asking questions. I'm like, the nights are gonna go longer. How can you handle all these budgets for a $300 million budget? And then you want to cut 2 days because you think that we can get more efficient. It's not gonna work. We're gonna just go late. So he's like, no, I'm gonna condense the schedule. If it goes late, it goes late. Now it's like people don't want to go late. Now it's like, maybe we should go back to the 8 days. And spread them out a little bit more. We'll end earlier. And I'm fine with that. I have no problem with it. I'm willing to give the 2 days and let people get out early. But the time should be what the time is to properly do the job. And if one of us wants to ask questions, I don't think anybody should be cut short. John, in regards to, I appreciate it. Other boards do have cutoff times. And the rule I really loved was the best rule I've been on most of the town bodies, other than the Board of Ed. The RTM rule's great. It's fantastic. Because it ends at 11. You don't finish at 11, everybody shows up the next night, 8 o'clock. We do it all again. So that night goes to 11, and it goes a third night until the agenda's over. And I'm fine with that too, as long as everyone here is fine with that we will go the next night. Whether people can't be here or not be here. I think it's, out of all the bodies I served on, that was the best one. Other than just hearing everything out. So.
But they can suspend their role, the RTM.
That's what would happen every single time. Every single time I was on the RTM and it got to 11 o'clock, not one person wanted to come back the next night. They'd much rather, they didn't care whether it went another 2 hours. And that's kind of what we do. We just don't have rules about it.
I mean, we might end up with that, but the only thing I would say is that, like, I hear you, but I think we should challenge ourselves to try to get more efficient. I mean, even in our regular meetings, we should be able to finish our business in
This
3.5 hours.
This
Like,
isn't just for the budget.
yeah.
This is for all our meetings.
Yeah.
I think a regular meeting, we start at 7:30, we should be able to finish by 11 o'clock at night. The Board of Ed agendas, you see their agendas?
Yeah.
They're like 7 pages long, they do it. We should be able to do it.
Yeah,
We should be able to do it, but there should be a limitation. Last meeting, the number of items that were on it, there was like 18 items on it. It went for 3 pages. That should never happen. Madam Chairwoman, with all due respect, you should push back on the administration and say, sorry, give me your top 10. Everything else will either have to wait, I don't care what you have to do, or you have to ask me for a special meeting. And you have to come to us and say, there's a bunch of things that need to be heard. We're gonna have to have a special meeting this month. I don't think any of us would have a problem with it. But you can't sit here and have it both ways, where you put 18 agenda items on here and expect us to half-ass it, to kind of rush through them to get it done by 11 o'clock. I mean, I knew when I saw that agenda, I was shocked when I saw it. I'm like, boy, it's gonna be a late night. I think I had a conversation with Ms. Ruggiero about it. So, do you see how many items are on this thing? I'm like, yeah, you better bring your coffee or whatever you
Jammies,
need.
yeah.
Because, so, you know, that's what, I'll tell you, that's what the zoning department does. If you go to a zoning board of appeals hearing, they put, I think it's 15 items. That's the most on their agenda. And when the 16th item, the homeowner walks in and says, I need a variance of 6 inches. Because, you know, I'm having twins and I need to have this extra bedroom. They say, sorry, we filled up for the 15. We'll see you 30 days from now. We're planning on your.
Just to, and I hear you, so I'm not trying to be defensive because I think you raise a good point. Believe it or not, I do that, and David can attest to this. So there are in every agenda, there are what I'll call maybe some optional items, and there are some items that are time sensitive. And so the time sensitive items go on there. There are also items like I think our last meeting or the one before, we had one to hear like the purchasing policy and to vote on that, right? I mean, we didn't have to do that night. But it was one of those things where it'd been hanging around, you know, it was a good thing. I wanted to get it done because that starts to impact when Adam Tooling can roll out training, when they can start implementing these things. So it's a mixed bag. There have been times like David asked about the golf commission. The night the golf commission wanted to present, I said, no, our agenda's too big. We'll put them on the next one. And so we did that. So some of that does happen, but I acknowledge it's not always perfect. And so we'll, you know, again, I'm not trying to be defensive, but I don't simply just accept whatever they give. We do try to manage it. And I hear what you're saying. I think we all are saying the same thing. I just would, to me, I really do believe there is a downside to staying late at these meetings. I do not think, and I have seen it, we are not effective when it gets to late hours in the morning. I think many of us have done exactly what Craig said, where we're like, I'm not gonna ask this question because like I want to get out of here. That's not good. I think that's just not the way we should do things. So all of us have a responsibility where, you know, depending on what the items are, we need to debrief, stick to the agenda items. We tend to veer off into things that may be interesting, but they're not specifically on the item at hand. And that happens, and that's okay sometimes, but it's not okay when we have long agendas or we're going late into the hours on a budget meeting. So I feel like if nothing else, if this makes us all more cognizant of that, maybe that will be worth it. Shane?
I'm in favor of a cutoff time. I don't know if you guys know this. The last budget night, I think I'm the only Board of Finance member who fainted that evening. Yeah, I'm very much in favor of cutoff time. I also have kids wake me up early.
He did. He cracked his head on the. He ended up with.
It's really lovely. So this is probably a question out of naivete, so don't everyone jump down my throat. Why? What's the? Why is everyone averse to the idea of having minutes that you could, for example, cede to other people? Like, because that would certainly push, like having
Have what?
time limits for each person to speak. Like, is it just too difficult to actually implement?
Well, no, there is, Robert's rule does have a default
But everyone was like, it's
default guideline where a member is permitted to speak 10 minutes on an item. Okay, and that's there. And we've never enforced that. We've never chosen to adopt that. I'm a little, like, I don't want to sit here with an egg timer and be like, okay, Mary, you've been talking for, you know, like, I think that, because to me, that goes against the spirit of, we all want to make sure that we can ask what we want to ask. If somebody gets, you know, somebody starts going down a rabbit hole, then I think any of us can speak up and say, hey, we need to redirect.
The only reason I say it is because I think, you know, the idea of a deadline, like 11 p.m. cutoff makes sense, but everyone's brought up some pretty good points that we do have a lot of agenda items. And it sounds like if we're in it, we're just gonna vote to keep going on.
We might end up doing that. So that might end up happening, but if it, you know, maybe it helps a little. Jim?
What is the flexibility in terms of adjusting the starting time on a night where you have a lot of agenda items and you think you're gonna go to 11:30? Could you be able to start at 7 so you can hopefully end at 11, or as long as you give the town notice?
Well, no, we just voted on our official schedule. So the only difference would be we can start at an earlier time, subject to everyone's availability. It becomes a special meeting, which just means we can't vote on minutes and we can't do anything that's not strictly on the agenda. So that is a possibility, but you know, typically we wouldn't know that. Like the agenda is coming together in the week or two before the meeting. It depends on what we're getting from the Board of Selectmen, et cetera. So it can happen.
A day or two, not a week or two.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah, some things we know, but it's just,
I mean, my observation from the most recent meeting where it went late was that, you know, if one particular item, which had to do with the town of Fairfield's budget, had maybe happened earlier in the night, and I realize that you're very respectful of other people that, where you put the agenda, I get that. You know, that was probably maybe the most difficult item to cover at 11 o'clock. And, you know, I mean, I respected your response in terms of, yeah, it's the first quarter, there's no changes here. But at the same token, you know, it wasn't until after we went through that item that I was really made aware that there were a lot of items that I think should have been discussed and should have been pointed out, and it shouldn't have been just 0 quarter. So I was appreciative that we spent the time. So it was sort of like, yeah, I realize everybody wants to get home, but I mean, this was the quarterly meeting. That's what we were supposed to be here for.
yeah. And that's again,
I appreciate.
that's a great point. And I don't say this to be defensive, but sometimes, you know, if you have a few things on the agenda and you'll have this person, whether it's the police chief or a department head who, you know, has an item that's gonna take 10 minutes, you know, I get asked that, you know, can you give this person a break? Just put them on first so they can get out of here, you know, because they're sitting here and, you know, rather than, I just think it's disrespectful to make someone just wait until 10 or 10:30. And maybe there's different views on that, but we try to do that if we can. And again, because the finance folks are here all night anyway, we kind of say, all right, well, you know, but you're right. So with the meatier items, and this goes for the budget too, I think Craig has said this, there's certain departments that require more brain power to get through. Some of the finance items are like that, like the whole interest income discussion. Those are things we should strive to do earlier, regardless of the impact on, you know, who's first and second. Sometimes it is pure availability. I mean, I know, you know, I've had requests that, listen, I can only be here, I can only show up between this time because I have a family commitment or whatever. So sometimes that's how that happens, but your point is well taken, and that's a good point. Trying to get to those more difficult items earlier when we're sharp. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. My only suggestion though would be, and I don't know if this could have been done, but, you know, along the same lines of that Google spreadsheet, but could we have submitted those questions ahead of time?
I would be thrilled. I think the thing is, submitting the questions ahead of time for any meeting doesn't necessarily mean we don't have to talk about them. But we can just be sharper. The administration can be prepared. They can have data. Somebody's not trying to look it up. So I would always encourage that. I think what makes it difficult in many of our meetings is the agenda is just sometimes in the backup simply is not ready far ahead of time. That is not the case for the budget. We're going to have that budget book, all of us, weeks before we have to start deliberating on the budget. So we can, you know, I always used to get annoyed when people would say, well, watch the Board of Selectmen meetings first. And, you know, I don't have time to do that, so I don't do that. But I do have time to go through the budget book. So any opportunity to ask questions in advance will help us be more efficient. So I appreciate that. Amy?
You know, I think that this board has a mix of a lot of different people with different levels of experience. And I think there are certain people that have been on this board for a very long time that we kind of appreciate the value that they add. I think that I don't think a time limit is gonna necessarily curb any behavior or questions, because I think that the person answering or asking those questions feels like they're very important and valuable. So I don't think it's gonna change anyone's behavior. And then we're gonna be left with the decision of how we're gonna handle that. So, you know, I think that puts us in a situation, and while I totally appreciate that the RTM has a time limit, I think we're, you know, people look for this board, you know, setting the mill rate, really driving the decision for what's gonna happen to the individual and the taxpayers. And there's an enormous amount of pressure on this board in particular to make sure that we vet every single thing. So, I mean, I'm not one for staying late. I'd rather be home. I have a young son. It's not ideal, but I don't think it's gonna change anything. And I think we're gonna end up, yes, we could all be cognizant. I certainly try to be very cognizant on the questions that I ask and make it quick. But, I think we might get ourselves in a position where we're then coming back the next night, and I can tell you that would be very undesirable for my personal circumstance.
No,
And I certainly would not want to not be here, because I don't think I've ever missed a meeting since I've been on this board. I haven't, so, I wanna be cognizant, I wanna move it along. I try to ask questions that, are a certain dollar amount, having been on, in FP&A for such a long period of my career. But, everyone has an obligation or, wants to ask the questions they wanna ask. And while I might think it's a silly question, because it's a small amount, the person answering that obviously feels compelled to ask that question. So I just think it's gonna put us in a position where we could be in a hole, stuck coming back or having confrontation like the last meeting when it was going late with questions that were very small, which I think we all have a lot of respect for each other and don't want it to get to that point, but it could. Because when you're also getting late, it gets confrontational at times, right? Like we all wanna go home. So I just wanna bring that up because I don't wanna find myself in that position. I certainly don't wanna feel like I don't do the due diligence to people that put myself here.
Thank you. No, one thing I will say is if this were to result in having more meetings or scheduling additional meetings, I think we've defeated the whole purpose. The purpose is to be more focused. And let me just give one example from last budget season. And I'm not saying this to pick on Jim because I actually appreciated these questions. But so for example, Jim, like you asked questions about cell phones. And I think we should ask questions about cell phones. I thought that was appropriate. What are we doing?
The cell phones that are not necessarily all over town.
Well, agreed.
No,
Okay,
no.
so the question, yeah, but I think though, but here's a suggestion, right?
Yeah.
And that you wanted to challenge the department heads. What are we doing with cell phones? How many cell phones do you have? What are we spending? What's the criteria? Whatever. Great questions. And every department's getting asked those questions. Okay, it's not necessarily a huge dollar amount, but it's more of it's informative in terms of kind of the tone and how people are managing things and how careful people are with money, right? So I get that. But that's an example of one where we could say, listen, the budget meetings are gonna start next week. I want you guys to come prepared with this information. I want to know, what is the cell phone program? What's the criteria? What's every department spending? So that these guys come prepared with an analysis and we can get through it in 15 or 20 minutes and ask our questions. Because I think,
Department had something.
Yeah.
I mean, Kathleen Simpson thinks that if she brings in a person for 2 hours a day as an extra person.
No, I hear you.
Every person in her, deserves was her word.
But this came out during
Smartphones.
Q&A, I know, but my point was, and I'm not arguing with that, my point was this came out with Q&A in every department, and I feel like we ended up, and maybe I'm wrong, but like this time accumulates. So when there are things like that, I think, and I understand what you're saying, Amy, but I want us to challenge ourselves to try and figure out ways to maybe do this in a way that's more effective. And that might be one example where you say, listen, and we tried to do this with the Google sheet, but we kind of left it to everybody to just ask their questions. If you want this, if you want these questions answered, then let's funnel them up and let's make sure that the department heads and the finance department come with data so that we can have the discussion. The answers are evident. We can figure out what we want to do and go from there. And that's just one example, but I think there are probably more of those like that. So again, I'm not trying to pick on the question you asked because I get it. Like I always kind of wondered what we were doing, but I feel like Same thing with maybe the IT department and laptops or monitors. There were things like that that were not necessarily big dollars, but all these things add up. And I feel like we introduced those questions as Q&A during a budget discussion. Nothing wrong with doing that, but to the extent we can do that and be better prepared ahead of time, I do believe that's a way we can get the data we need, get better data, more informative data, and move the meetings along. Just one thought, yes.
I love that idea personally. I think that would be very helpful. I know, T&L was another big question that was asked to every department
Yep,
last time. I was on the budget committee.
like what are you spending on meals, for example?
Yes, exactly. That was asked to everyone because I think there was a question or a rub from the previous situation that left people concerned.
Sure, the credit
Leave
card.
it at that. So I was on the subcommittee and I can honestly say I contributed zero because I don't think we did anything in advance other than put up the Google Doc. So I don't know if there's something that if we're on this, we're gonna have a budget subcommittee meeting again.
Yep.
We meet in advance and tell everybody, here's the format we want it in. Here are the questions that you need to be prepared. You're gonna get a walk on head count. You're gonna need to explain all of that. You're gonna need to explain your T&L. You're gonna need to explain, your cell phone policy. You take us through it like Anthony did a couple of weeks ago where it was so perfect. Or like the golf guy, like it was just every single thing.
Exactly.
Where you just had it laid out and you have a full presentation and say, well, I have a raise here of 20% and here's why. And there's a variance analysis that explains all the movement. And we let all the heads know in advance as part of the subcommittee before we go into these meetings. Here's what we are going to ask, so be prepared for it. Or have it written down, like put it in your handout. And then we can read it in advance and say, all right, well, you got 6 people last year and put a P, prior year V on what's happening. Because that's where a lot of your questions are gonna come from. And I think honestly, the budget that we're going into this year is gonna be harder than any other budget. You know what I mean? I think it's gonna be a very tough year with, the capital projects and various things going on. I think we're heading for some very tough decisions. So I think to the extent we can be prepared in advance, and I'm happy to meet and contribute more, because it was my first. I'm on the subcommittee and I literally, this is very different than the long one.
Right.
So
That's great. I mean, frankly, the process that you described would be, to the extent that those questions were asked before the budget was even prepared, that might be even better, because then when departments are preparing the budget, it might cause them to, think harder about what they asked for in the budget. So, to me, budget committee, looking at this process, I'm not gonna serve on it, but I really think there's an opportunity here. Because again, to me, it's how effective are we being? I do think staying late makes us ineffective. I do think we've tried to do a bunch of things to get better data. I think we can do a lot more. And so those are great suggestions, and I would love to have an active 3-person budget committee that takes these things, solicits input, and we just
running like a corporation.
Yeah.
You walk in for a budget request at a corporation, you're explaining every single variance and your need and why, and you're buttoned up pretty tight, or you're getting a no.
It was you, Chris, and who else was on the committee last year?
No, it was myself, Lori and Jack.
we really didn't, and honestly,
We had the Google Sheet set up. I mean, there was a Google Sheet, but I did nothing. We didn't have a meeting, we didn't.
yeah, and it was sort of typically what we did,
I
and
think
this
it was if there was some other takeaways there.
So I mean, we did an analysis of the budget, we laid out all the numbers from the prior year, we looked at the departments, what percentage they were of the overall budget to figure out who needed to show up and who didn't.
Yeah, Frank,
Figured, okay, if we get, this number of departments, we could eliminate a whole bunch and we're still covering 98% of the budget dollars. So we sort of did that analysis, we did the schedule, we worked with Jen, we got everybody there. But we set up a Google Sheet, but we did not do what Amy suggested. I think that would be great. So I
just think we can all agree that I don't think it's gonna change anyone's behavior. I think
Well-
we're gonna get the same, I think if we go with this new approach,
Yes.
that will give us a lot of the answers.
Agreed.
advance and let people know when you're coming into prep and you're prepping yourself to come into in front of the Board of Finance, you need to be nailed down on all your requests. Because everything is tight, there's a lot of new members around the table.
Yeah.
You know, let's go through it, and there's a lot of members that
Those are
are, they're
great.
gonna ask a lot of
Great
questions,
suggestions.
so.
Love that. Mary?
So at one time, and I'm going back a while because I forget what changed that we don't really get it anymore, is they used to give us a really thick binder of the munis backup, and it was how each department head built his budget. And so it would give you what's built into each line for like library materials. It would have given you all the details they use. And then I think they got away from that and don't really build their budget so much.
Not in the exact detail, but that's the text detail report. And I think you and I were, I was in the board, were the two that most confident. Would immediately turn to Gardner at the beginning, and it got to a point, printed them and dropped them, and it was about this big, but it was more valuable than the book.
Because it gives all that detail.
Yeah, and we
I
can,
mean, that's what, something we could try to get back.
It has a lot of their-
It's probably just not distributed, right?
yeah, it definitely, it does still exist, we can remind them.
Seems like there was less and less information each year in it, was the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I know that at one point when Frank took over, and I think Frank did a lot of great things, but one of the things he did, I think, was even eliminate the column of what the department originally requested, like that just went away.
Yeah.
And that used to be informative too, you know, because you could kind of see what they did versus what the first select person agreed to in their, but, you know, so that would be, if that's helpful, that could be one of the things that goes into the bucket of items.
And then the other thing I just wanted to say is when we look at a budget at more as a conversation, and Craig will ask a question, and it's a really good question, and we get information that surprises us. And then Jim will jump in or John will jump in, and that's how we get into these long discussions, but they're really useful discussions. So I don't want to discourage that either. And like if you limit we go around the table and everyone gets 5 minutes to talk, you're not gonna have those nice.
So I agree, and that's why I wouldn't suggest that. I think what I'm hearing, and I like this idea, and again, I think we've tried to take baby steps, but as I said at the outset of this meeting, we can get a lot better at the way we do this. What I'm hearing is that better data would help us be more effective, and we need to play a part in that by laying out what our expectations are with more clarity. And I think an active budget committee to do that, to solicit input from this board. I mean, I'm happy to, what we can do is set up a budget committee, the budget committee can get organized, figure out what they want to do, and then put in, you know, another agenda item for discussion to, you know, say what you've come up with, and we can give feedback, and then you can finalize work with the administration. I think that's great. I mean, the reason we didn't, you know, on this item tonight, we didn't want to vote on anything in terms of a rule, because I do want this to be an open forum, and I think this is really helpful. So better data in advance, more clarity about what we expect, I think will help the administration as well as the board.
Can I just ask one question? Because I have a question and I don't know where else it fits in on this agenda, but we lost Frank.
Yes.
And we've had the CFO position open for, I mean, I feel like it's coming on a year. And where do we stand? Like, who's putting the budget together? Are
We have a
bringing
temporary-
surge resources, like what's happening?
Yes, we do have a temporary person, right? Just
We-
briefly, can you? Yeah.
No, we have somebody who's working on the budget, on an interim basis. They're, so. Also our process now, we have another vacancy that's coming at the end of the week inside the finance department,
Someone else resigned?
so we're,
What position is that?
well, not exactly what it's called. It's essentially an analyst type position.
Where are we with the CFO search?
There are, several, I think there's 2 candidates that are being presented that need to get interviews next. The packets have been brought forward to the to the first selectman. There's two that
Yeah, I had asked the first selectman and I heard that we were not, for some period of time, we weren't getting quality resumes. Like we were getting resumes that may have been good, but not for a CFO. They were.
We might have to go steal another town's.
If only
Honestly,
it were
we might have to go and make them a deal they can't refuse or something. We need to get us somebody in here.
those deals, I mean, and you looked at the compensation back when we talked about that position, my position, all of that, those numbers are looking like, 230 to 240, potentially real.
We have 190.
We have 190 in there right now. They include potentially relocation costs. Most of those are actually smaller overall, less reports, direct reports to them. Some of those are coming out of much smaller municipalities even. There's a number of factors. Those municipalities in most instances have fewer or smaller boards with significantly less meetings. I believe this is somewhere in the 24 plus special meeting category right now, just for this board alone. The CFO position sits on the joint retirement board, on the police and fire retirement board, sits as ex officio on
Everyone told the RTM meetings as well.
RTM meetings.
Selectmen.
Essentially it's expected to be at all, most of those, also is ex officio on the WPCA, which now the administration, rightfully has a much more active role to it. So there's a number of different pieces there. So, our last top, candidate essentially was, we offered, at the just shy of 190, we were offering only about $5 or $6 grand more than they were making now. The municipality that's less than half our size, and is, a cakewalk time wise.
Well, the person's gonna be working sometimes to as late as our budget meetings go.
Right.
So that's a huge undertaking. So again, to my point about the budget, I think that salary, obviously, we're finding out is too low. That's gonna put pressure in other areas because 190 for a CFO, when I heard that, to me is.
The other issue is, and I've spoken with, some others in municipalities, but it is a narrow pool to begin with at this point. I mean, just sort of the top tier of municipal in the Northeast and in general is narrow and just. So it's a problem that we have. It's a problem if we lose, department heads at this point. There's concerns of department head schedule. If you look at the compensation on it and you do some benchmarking, we know that it's low. We're worried about that. Same, this position. So, even just looking at, associate analyst is a current title. So, well, like Sabrina, maybe one below, but, trying to recruit for that,
So we,
potentially gonna be problematic, so.
no, this is, I know you're trying, this is a challenge.
So,
Listen, it doesn't help when we're, doesn't make the job more attractive if we're keeping people till, 1 AM for 24 meetings a year. So I just, and thank you for asking that. I think the temporary person previously worked in the town in another capacity, I think at the board.
worked on the Board of Ed side. ran
Understands
Board of Ed
Munis,
side, very
It's gonna help get us through this. So,
And they wanna be a temp, they don't wanna be a permanent.
So there are pension issues.
Fire.
with
I
that,
won't ask,
that-
I know it's HR private issues, I'm
However-
not gonna be defined.
Timer for a period of time.
So because she started towards the end of the year, she can actually work almost essentially 40 hours a week till the end of the year. And even if at the beginning of the year, there'd be a 6-month window where she.
So we have a resource for the budget,
Yeah.
but we have to go down a parallel path of finding a permanent person. And as we're having this discussion, I don't wanna keep us here till midnight having this discussion, but it sounds like there were some great ideas. It sounds like there's some enthusiasm about actually serving on a budget committee to fix this, but I think as we do this, the budget is actually a good goal for our meetings. We can apply some of these principles to some of the other things that we are doing as well. But the budget is a big chunk, and I think if we can get that right, we can make a lot of headway. So I will reach out to everyone and would love to I think Amy, I think your suggestions are right on, and we need to move in that direction, and we just need to be more disciplined about it. So I think the Google Sheet was a great start. It was okay, you can ask a question and ask for data, so you have that, but it was too ad hoc.
Yeah, I just think we could get to a standard format with expectations and explanations
And
and go
timing.
faster.
And timing, because a lot of times, I know I'm guilty of it, those budget meetings come fast and furious, but it's the day before I'm reading the budget sheets for who's gonna present the next day. If I'm asking my questions the day before and you're getting information that morning, it's not particularly helpful. So anticipating the types of things, the quality and the type of data we need and asking in advance, I think would be enormously helpful. So I think the follow-up item is to work on that. And so I thank everybody for that feedback. And why don't we maybe we can shelve the 11 o'clock thing until we,
Let's see how it goes.
yeah, okay.
You could always call a point of order. I mean, if there's an issue going on and we feel like it's draining.
I'd rather just interrupt Jim.
I can pick him, but if you want to signal to me, pick him
I will tell you,
or poke him.
I don't wanna have to make a department head wait here till 11 o'clock
Oh.
to make them come back for a new day.
Yeah, agree.
Stay till.
No, I don't think we're gonna, that is, the objective is not to do that. I mean, obviously, if we get into a situation where that's what we're doing, we've defeated the purpose. It's really to just get better so we can have more effective.
We'll hit up Jim for all the questions he's gonna ask in advance for each department in all seriousness with the level of experience he has, and John and Mary, the ones that know this like by the back of their hand. And we'll try to incorporate that in our committee for the budget and try to address it so that everyone comes to the table and they can start going through it. So Jim doesn't even have a question to ask. He's just asking for clarification.
That's never gonna happen.
And I
Feel
just,
free to give me a taser.
no, I listen, I said this at the beginning of the meeting and I really mean it. No, I think that, and I tell everybody this, that I think I've learned more from Mary LeClaire than almost, I think Mary, like 24 years on this board, Mary has seen everything. I value that tremendously, Jim, John,
The quiet, powerful weapon.
yeah, I mean, we may disagree on things and have different ideas, but I think everyone does respect each other and appreciate what everyone brings. And so if we can harness that in a better way, that's great. Okay, so TBD, but I will reach out and I think there's great opportunity with this. Okay, so with that, the next item 11 is minutes to hear, consider, and act upon the draft minutes of October 1, 2024 and 6, 2024. So a motion to hear this, Craig?
We do them separately since I wasn't here.
We will vote separately. Do you want to second the motion?
Yeah.
Mr. Myers, okay. All right, so the draft minutes begin on page 113 of the posted backup. We can take comments one at a time, and again, we'll vote separately since we had different members present. Are there any comments on the draft minutes from October 1st, 2024? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the draft minutes of October 1, 2024? Ms. LeClaire, Ms. Ruggiero, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Stark, Mr. Curley, Ms. Charlton, Matola, Mr. Penley, opposed, abstentions, Mr. Myers, thank you. Those minutes are approved, 8-0-1. Okay, November 6th, 2024, are there any comments on those? Ms. LeClaire, it's noted in those that you were absent, is that correct? Okay. Comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the November 6th, 2024 draft minutes? Okay, opposed, abstentions, okay, and approved, that is unanimous with no opposed and Ms. LeClaire abstaining. Great. So we'll move on to item 12 to hear committee updates. Mr. Matola, do you want to give a quick update on the audit committee?
I mean, we had a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. We said Bonnie about draft audit report. I could add to it.
The audit's essentially done.
It's done. The audit's done.
unqualified
No,
opinion?
there's no real surprises. I didn't see any surprises. And that's really it. I mean, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I don't think he said he doesn't have any, past adjustments that are more than trivial, so nothing to report to us.
I do want to say one thing. So we get from PFK every year, it's a letter to the board. It asks us to answer certain questions about, are we aware of any actual instances of fraud in the town? And talked to Mary for the meeting. It's addressed to the Board of Finance. I'm gonna send you this and take a quick look at it. I assume when you read these 3 or 4 questions, the answers for each one of them are gonna be no. If you think there's an issue, then you gotta tell me. I gotta put it in here because we have to disclose this. It's part of the, I think members who've been here for a while know what this is about.
I mean, technically, he should have asked us this at the beginning,
He
because
did.
if there were any potential instances of fraud, he would have to design audit procedures to address those, so,
He didn't see anything, so.
yeah, so.
And fairness to him, and I apologize, this was sent on September 23rd. And
So if anyone has anything, tell John.
I'll send it to you tomorrow. Just, if I don't hear from you in a couple of days, I'll assume all the answers are no. Okay?
Part of the audit, do they have like a list of corrective actions that they recommend?
Yeah, we didn't,
Sometimes do.
we have had those in the
I had them
past.
in the past, but there's nothing this time.
We used to get what used to be called the management letter.
Right.
He didn't have any comments to share, so, but just so for
We're
his
gonna
benefit,
get-
we do get a full
We get a final
presentation.
report, you'll come to us, full presentation,
February usually.
everyone will get the report.
Okay, great.
See the announcement.
Yes.
So the audit committee reads the draft and gives any feedback, but the whole board will get a full presentation once the report is issued. Okay, fund balance borrowing and debt service committee, just quickly, we met twice thus far. At our most recent meeting 2 weeks ago, we discussed the fund balance policy. There were no votes. We talked about potentially updating the range of the recommended fund balance to more closely align with the benchmarking provided by Phoenix and where we actually are. Right now, we're kind of out of our policy. Our policy is 8 to 11%, 7.6. So we talked about maybe shifting the range to encompass what we're actually doing. We also talked conceptually about establishing a policy for fund balance in the internal service fund, but there's more work to do there. Committee was also charged with evaluating WPCA's financial plan so that before it gets incorporated into the town's capital plan. That task has been delayed a bit. Frank's departure set us back a little bit, so he was the point person on the mechanics of that, working with the WPCA, but the work is still continuing, so we'll get a further status update when we meet this Thursday. And again, people are always welcome to those meetings.
This Thursday, are we, just because I know a lot of other members have come as well, is it in person, on the phone? Where, I haven't seen an agenda.
Yeah, the agenda, we're in person, but the agenda is, will come out tomorrow.
6 o'clock start, right?
Set
Yes.
for fix.
Yeah, we voted on the schedule last time, so it's 6 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah, I had 6 o'clock. I just didn't have it.
Yeah. So that's on me. I need to get the agenda out. Okay.
You can still attend remotely if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll set Tuesday.
I'll be there.
All right, anything else? Committee updates?
I'm not sure if it was as part of the fund balance committee, but I seem to remember a previous meeting, we talked about having a schedule that showed sort of the capital plan in relationship to how it's gonna affect the fund balance and where it settles on the.
So for the WPCA or?
And I thought it was for the whole budget, just to. Am I?
Yeah, so what we talked about was looking at, long story, getting a revised capital plan that would project out how it would impact our debt service costs over time. The current plan that we have has the numbers, has all that in there, but the numbers are quite high. And so that's part of the work that's going on behind the scenes.
Okay.
And the WPCA is a big component of that because we were trying to figure out with them, it's not just how much their projects are gonna cost, but who's gonna pay for them. So they were trying to put together the detail for that, and Frank was working on that, so we could help evaluate it and bring it forth to the board, and we'll get an update on Thursday, so more to come on it.
Yeah, and Sabrina's taking that now, but we're working with the new manager on really refining what that capital plan
Okay.
looks like.
So
Because
why don't we hold off until Thursday and then okay. All right, so that's it. Item 13, to hear, consider and act on any communications. David, do you have anything?
No.
All right, so make a motion, item 14, motion to adjourn. Craig, second. Jim, all in favor? All right, thank you, everyone.